The night I thought was harmless. I used to believe that bad things only happened to careless people. People who didn't love their spouses enough. People who were reckless, loud, obvious. I wasn't any of those things. At least, that's what I told myself. The night my husband discovered my affair didn't begin with guilt. It didn't begin with fear. It began with a dress laid across our bed and a mirror that reflected a woman who still thought she was in control. The red dress hugged my body in a way I hadn't allowed myself to notice in years. Not because my husband didn't want me, he did, but because somewhere along the way, I had stopped wanting to be seen by him. I wish I could tell you exactly when that happened. But neglect doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, disguised as routine. Is this too much? I asked my husband as I stepped out of the bedroom. He looked up from tying his shoes and smiled. You look beautiful, he said simply. Not dangerous. Not unforgettable. Just beautiful. I nodded, forcing a smile back, and went to grab my purse. That should have been enough. It should have filled me. But instead, it felt like something was missing, something I didn't yet have the courage to name. The party was for his company. A celebration for a big client. A rented venue with dim lights, music that was just loud enough to make conversations intimate, and alcohol that flowed too easily. I stayed close to my husband at first. Smiled politely. Laughed at jokes I'd heard before. Played the role I had perfected over the years, supportive wife, graceful presence, harmless. And then I saw him. Ethan. He was leaning against the bar, sleeves rolled up, laughing at something someone said. He looked effortless. The kind of man who didn't try to command attention, yet somehow pulled it anyway. Our eyes met for a brief second. Just a second. He smiled, not the polite kind, but the knowing kind. I looked away immediately. That should have been the end of it. But temptation never begins with action. It begins with permission. Later, when my husband was pulled into a conversation with his boss, Ethan appeared beside me. Red suits you, he said. I laughed softly. It's just a dress. No, he replied. It's confidence. I should have shut it down. I knew how these things worked. I'd seen enough stories online. Enough warnings. Instead, I thanked him. That's how it started. With a thank you. The conversation stayed light. Work. Music. The party. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing physical. And yet, something in the air shifted. A warmth I hadn't felt in years wrapped itself around me, and I let it. I told myself it was harmless. That night, when we drove home, my husband reached for my hand like he always did. You okay? He asked. You seem quiet. I'm just tired, I said. That wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. The truth was, my mind wasn't in the car. It was still at the bar, replaying a smile that wasn't my husband's. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a presence I didn't ask for, but didn't avoid either. We ran into each other at another event. Then again. A message followed. Then another. Nothing explicit. Nothing you could screenshot and scream cheater at. Just words. How was your day? You seemed stressed earlier. Your laugh stayed with me. I never told my husband. Not because I was hiding something. At least, that's what I convinced myself, but because it felt insignificant. A harmless escape. A reminder that I was still desirable. But desire is a dangerous thing when it's fed in secret. One night, Ethan asked me a question that changed everything. Are you happy? I stared at my phone for a long time before replying. I thought about my husband, his quiet consistency, his loyalty, the way he still looked at me like I was home. I typed. I don't know. That was the moment the line disappeared. I didn't fall into an affair all at once. I stepped into it slowly, carefully, telling myself I could step back anytime. But secrets grow heavier the longer you carry them. The party, the one that ended everything, was months later. Bigger. Louder. More crowded. Another company event, another excuse to pretend everything was normal. This time, when I put on the red dress, I felt fear beneath the excitement. Because Ethan would be there. And because, deep down, I knew something was about to break. I just didn't know it would be me. The affair that thought it was invisible. There's a dangerous comfort in secrecy. Once you cross the line the first time, your mind begins rewriting rules you once swore by. What felt forbidden starts feeling necessary. What felt wrong begins to feel deserved. I told myself I wasn't a bad person. Bad people didn't feel guilt the way I did, tight in the chest, heavy behind the eyes. Bad people didn't lie awake at night replaying every message, every glance, every almost touch. But guilt didn't stop me. It only made me quieter. Ethan and I never labeled what we were doing. That was part of the illusion. Labels make things real. Labels demand decisions. So we existed in the gray. We talked during lunch breaks. Late at night, when my husband slept beside me, breathing steady, trusting. Sometimes I would turn my phone face down and stare at the ceiling, my heart racing, not from desire, but from fear of myself. What am I doing? I whispered once, alone in the bathroom. The woman in the mirror didn't answer. My husband noticed changes before I admitted them to myself. "You've been distant lately," he said one evening as we sat on opposite ends of the couch. "I'm just stressed," I replied automatically. "Is it work?" "Yes." Another lie. Small. Clean. Easy. He nodded, accepting it without suspicion. That trust should have stopped me. Instead, it made everything worse. Ethan noticed everything. When I was quiet, he asked why. When I laughed less, he leaned closer. When I hesitated, he reassured me. "I see you," he said once, his voice low during a conversation that felt too intimate for public space. Those words hit something deep inside me. Seen. Not as a wife. Not as a role. But as a woman. The first time he touched my hand, it was accidental, or at least we pretended it was. His fingers brushed mine as he passed me a drink. The contact lasted half a second too long. I pulled away. "I shouldn't," I said softly. He didn't argue. He didn't push. That restraint made it harder to resist. The physical affair didn't start with passion. It started with silence. A car ride after a work dinner. The city lights blurred outside the windows. Music playing low. "I don't want to ruin your life," he said suddenly. I laughed nervously. "You won't." That was the lie that sealed my fate. When he kissed me, it wasn't desperate. It wasn't rushed. It was slow, careful, as if asking permission my conscience had already given. I went home that night and stood in the shower until the water ran cold. I scrubbed my skin as if guilt could be washed away. My husband hugged me from behind when I stepped out, wrapping a towel around my shoulders. "You smell like soap," he said with a smile. "Did you have a long day?" "Yes," I whispered. I didn't deserve his kindness. But I took it anyway. From that moment on, everything split into two lives. The life where I cooked dinner, laughed at my husband's stories, planned weekends. And the life where my phone buzzed with messages that made my heart race and my stomach drop at the same time. I became careful. Too careful. I deleted messages. I memorized excuses. I learned how to smile while lying. And that's the thing no one tells you about affairs, they don't just steal time. They steal you. I was never fully present anywhere. With Ethan, I was afraid of discovery. With my husband, I was afraid of exposure. Love turned into performance. Honesty into risk. The party invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Big venue, Open bar. Dress code formal. My heart sank when I saw Ethan's name on the guest list. You don't have to go if you don't want to, my husband said gently. I do, I replied too quickly. He studied my face for a moment, then smiled. Okay. That smile, God, that smile was still full of trust. The night of the party, I stood in front of the mirror again. Same red dress. Same reflection. But this time, the woman staring back looked afraid. I knew Ethan would be there. I knew my husband would be there. And I knew I was standing between two truths that could never exist in the same room. As we walked into the venue, music pulsing, laughter echoing, I felt a strange calm. Like the quiet before a storm. Ethan saw me from across the room. Our eyes met. This time, there was no smile. Only recognition. Only tension. Only the unspoken understanding that secrets don't disappear, they wait. And somewhere in that crowded room, without me realizing it yet, the first crack had already formed. The moment my husband looked at me differently. There are moments in life that don't arrive loudly. No shouting. No accusations. No dramatic confrontations. Just a look. And you know, something irreversible has happened. The party was already in full motion when we arrived. Crystal glasses clinked. Music wrapped itself around conversations. People laughed the way they always do when they want to appear happier than they are. My husband squeezed my hand gently before letting go. I'll grab us drinks, he said. Don't disappear. I won't, I replied. But I already had. I stayed near a tall table, pretending to scroll on my phone, pretending my heart wasn't beating too fast. I felt Ethan before I saw him. That pull, dangerous and familiar. Hey, he said quietly, standing beside me. Hey. We didn't touch. We didn't smile. It was worse than that. We stood too close for two people who were supposedly nothing. You look nervous, he said. I am. Because of him? I nodded. Ethan exhaled slowly. We should keep distance tonight. I know. But knowing and doing are very different things. Across the room, my husband laughed at something his colleague said. His shoulders relaxed. He looked safe. Grounded. And I felt like a stranger standing in his life. I told myself I would behave. No private corners. No long conversations. No risks. Then someone bumped into me, spilling a bit of wine on my dress. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, the woman said. It's okay, I replied quickly. Ethan instinctively reached out, his fingers brushing my waist for balance. That was all it took. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. But it was intimate. I froze. And that's when I felt it. Someone watching. I turned my head. My husband stood a few feet away, holding two drinks. His smile was gone, not replaced by anger, not by shock. By stillness. Our eyes met. In that second, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. He saw. He didn't see enough. Maybe it looked innocent. Maybe I'm imagining things. He handed me a glass. Red wine, he said calmly. Your favorite. Thank you, I whispered. His eyes flicked briefly to Ethan. Just a glance. Controlled. Measured. Then back to me. You look flushed, he said. Are you feeling okay? Yes, I lied, my voice barely steady. He nodded slowly. I'll be right back, he said, and walked away. That was it. No confrontation. No scene. But something in his walk had changed. I didn't see Ethan again for the rest of the evening. Or maybe I did. But I couldn't focus on anything except the growing weight in my chest. My husband became quiet. Not cold. Not angry. Quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like distance forming in real time. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past the window. The silence between us was loud enough to hurt. "Did you have a good time?" he asked eventually. "Yes," I said. Another lie. He nodded. "You seemed distracted." "I was just tired." He didn't respond. Instead, he reached for the radio and turned it on softly. That hurt more than yelling would have. At home, he brushed his teeth, changed clothes, climbed into bed like it was any other night. I lay awake beside him, staring into the dark. Every breath he took sounded heavier than usual. I wanted to confess. I wanted to cry. I wanted him to ask. But he didn't. The next few days were worse. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't distant in an obvious way. He was polite. Careful. Like someone handling something fragile they weren't sure they wanted to keep. He stopped reaching for my hand first. Stopped asking follow-up questions. Stopped sharing small things about his day. And I realized something terrifying. He didn't need proof. He felt it. One evening, as we washed dishes together, he spoke without looking at me. "Do you believe people can love someone and still betray them?" My heart stopped. I don't know," I said. He nodded slowly. "I think betrayal starts long before the act." I couldn't breathe. That night, I messaged Ethan. "We need to stop." He replied almost immediately. "Did something happen?" "My husband knows. Or he feels it. I can't do this anymore." There was a long pause. Then, "I'm sorry." I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. Sorry didn't undo anything. The next morning, my husband kissed my forehead before leaving for work. A soft kiss. Familiar. "I'll be late tonight," he said. "Okay." The door closed behind him with a finality that made my chest ache. I stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the life I was about to lose, and understood something too late. Affairs don't destroy marriages in one moment. They erode them quietly until one day, there's nothing left to stand on. And my husband was already standing somewhere I couldn't reach.